Some men my age come home from a fishing trip expecting a quiet kitchen, a warm lamp, and maybe a grandchild asleep on the couch with cartoons still glowing on the television. I came home to my 9-year-old grandson locked inside the pantry, barely able to stand, whispering through the door that he was sorry for being hungry, while my daughter-in-law sat at my dining table painting her nails and said, "He needed to learn gratitude." Let me back up, because a thing like that does not start with a locked door. It starts with small changes nobody wants to name. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 67 years old, retired from the fire department in Knoxville, Tennessee, though retired is a generous word for a man who still wakes up at 5:10 every morning without an alarm, because 32 years of sirens taught his bones the schedule. I spent my life walking into burning buildings, car wrecks, flooded basements, collapsed porches, and kitchens full of smoke where some old widow was crying over a pot roast. I thought I knew danger when I saw it. Turns out, danger does not always come with flames. Sometimes it wears a cardigan, smiles at church, brings lemon bars to the ladies' luncheon, and tells everybody she's exhausted from raising a child who is difficult. That child was my grandson, Caleb. Caleb was my son Daniel's boy. Daniel was my only child. His mother, my Ruth, used to say Daniel was born with a good heart and no common sense, which was true enough to make us both laugh. He trusted fast. He loved hard. He forgave before people even asked. When he married Melissa Hartley, I tried to be happy for him. I really did. Melissa was pretty in that polished way some women are. Not warm exactly, but shiny. Blonde hair always curled, nails always perfect, dresses that looked casual but cost more than my first truck. She called me Mr. Bennett for the first 6 months, even after I told her Harold was fine. At church, she held Caleb's hand like she was posing for a family newsletter. She told everyone she had stepped into motherhood with an open heart. I wanted to believe her. Daniel died 2 years into their marriage. A logging truck jackknifed on I-40 during a storm, and my boy was in the wrong lane at the wrong second. Caleb was 7 then. I still remember him standing beside the casket in a little navy suit, holding a toy fire engine I'd given him, not crying because nobody had told him yet that the kind of gone his daddy was didn't have visiting hours. After the funeral, Melissa and Caleb moved into my house. It was supposed to be temporary. She said she couldn't bear the apartment. Too many memories. Too much rent. Too much grief. I had a 3-bedroom ranch outside Maryville with a big yard, a shed full of tools, and more quiet than I knew what to do with. So I said yes. Family says yes, brothers and sisters. That's what family does. For a while, it seemed all right. Caleb had his room at the end of the hall, the one with the window facing the maple tree. Melissa took Daniel's old room. I slept in the primary bedroom Ruth and I had shared for 38 years. Though I still kept to my side of the bed like she might come back and complain my feet were cold. Caleb and I had our routines. Saturday pancakes, Wednesday library runs, firehouse chili on the first Sunday of every month with the old crew. He liked dinosaurs, weather maps, and taking apart broken radios. He asked questions that could wear the paint off a wall. "Grandpa, do clouds get tired? Grandpa, if a snake had shoes, how many would it need? Grandpa, did Dad know I loved him when he died?" That last one nearly put me on the floor. "He knew, buddy," I told him. "Your dad knew it better than anything." Melissa was never cruel in front of me. That's the important part. In front of me, she was tired, overwhelmed, fragile. She would press 2 fingers to her temple and say, Caleb had episodes. She said he snuck food, lied, broke things, refused chores. She said grief had made him manipulative. I should have asked more questions. I should have listened less to the adult with the polished voice and more to the little boy who got quieter every month. The first sign came in October. I came home from the hardware store and found Caleb sitting on the back steps in 4-8-degree weather without a jacket. His hands were tucked under his arms, and his lips were almost blue. "What in the world are you doing out here?" He jumped like I'd caught him stealing, thinking. Thinking requires shoes? He looked down at his socks. I forgot. I opened the door and called for Melissa. She came from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "He threw a tantrum," she said before I could ask. I told him to sit outside and cool off. For how long? She blinked. Harold, please don't undermine me. I'm doing the best I can. And there it was. The sentence that ended conversations. I brought Caleb in, made hot chocolate, and let it go. The second sign came from his teacher, Mrs. Donnelly. She called me one afternoon because I was listed as an emergency contact. Mr. Bennett, she said, careful as a nurse with bad news. Caleb has been asking to take extra food from the cafeteria. Crackers, apples, little milk cartons. He says he wants to save them. For what? There was a pause. He said, for later, in case dinner is canceled. I felt something in my chest tighten. I asked Melissa about it that evening. She sighed, sat down hard, and put her face in her hands. He's doing that for attention, she said. He eats plenty. I promise you, Harold. He is playing everyone against me. I know he seems sweet, but grief does things to children. Grief does things to adults too. It made me tired. It made me want peace. It made me accept explanations because the alternative was looking at my son's widow and admitting something ugly might be living under my roof. The third sign was the locked pantry. I did not know it was locked then. I only noticed a new brass latch high on the pantry door, the kind you'd put on a gate. I asked about it while Melissa was loading the dishwasher. Mice, she said. We don't have mice. We did. You just didn't notice. I had spent 3 decades noticing whether smoke was coming from behind walls, but I let my daughter-in-law tell me I hadn't noticed mice in my own house. That's the part that shames me most. Not that I was fooled. Plenty of people get fooled by a good liar. What shames me is how many times my gut spoke, and I told it to hush because the truth would be inconvenient. In late November, my old firehouse buddy, Roy Jenkins, invited me on a 4-day fishing trip to Dale Hollow. I almost said no. Caleb had been clingy that week, hovering near my recliner, asking when I'd be back, asking if phones worked on the lake. Melissa overheard and laughed. Goodness, Caleb, Grandpa is allowed to have a life. Caleb looked at the floor. I crouched in front of him. I'll be back Sunday afternoon, buddy. I'll bring you one of those gas station pecan logs you like. He nodded, but didn't smile. Before I left, I found him in the garage, standing beside my old turnout coat. He was rubbing the reflective stripe between his fingers. You okay? He whispered, Can I come? I almost said yes. I should have said yes. But Roy was already waiting in the truck, and Melissa was in the doorway with that tight, embarrassed smile. Caleb, she said sweetly, don't make Grandpa feel guilty. So I hugged him, told him I loved him, and left. The trip went wrong on Saturday morning. Roy slipped on the dock, twisted his knee, and cussed so loud, I'm pretty sure the fish left the county. We packed up early. I called Melissa twice on the drive home. No answer. I called the house. No answer. I texted, coming home early. Roy hurt his knee. Be there by evening. No response. That bothered me, but not enough. Not yet. I pulled into my driveway at 7:18 p.m. The porch light was off. That was strange. I always left it on when I traveled, and Melissa knew that. The house looked still, too still, like it was holding its breath. I opened the front door and heard something I will carry to my grave. A soft tapping, not a knock, not footsteps, a little tap-tap, pause. Tap-tap-tap. I set my duffel down. Caleb? The tapping stopped. Then, from the hallway near the kitchen, a voice so thin it barely counted as sound said, Grandpa? I moved faster than a man with 2 replaced knees ought to move. The pantry door was closed. The brass latch was hooked from the outside. A wooden chair had been shoved under the knob for good measure. On the floor beneath the door, I saw the tips of Caleb's fingers, pale and dirty, curled through the gap. I lifted the latch and yanked the door open. He fell forward into my arms. He weighed almost nothing. That was my first thought. My grandson, who used to climb me like a tree, felt like a bundle of laundry. His face was damp with sweat. His hair stuck to his forehead. His lips were cracked. One cheek had a red mark in the shape of fingers. He clutched a plastic sandwich bag with 2 stale crackers inside like it was a life raft. What happened? I said, but my voice broke on the second word. He blinked at me, confused, like he wasn't sure I was real. I'm sorry. I won't take food again. Behind me, a chair scraped. Melissa was at the dining table, candle burning, phone propped up, nails spread under a tiny fan. She looked annoyed, not frightened. Annoyed, like I had interrupted a television show. He stole from the pantry, she said. He has to learn consequences. I turned slowly. How long was he in there? She rolled her eyes. Don't start. He had water. I looked inside the pantry. There was no water. There was a tipped-over measuring cup on the shelf, and a dark, wet spot where something had spilled. How long? Since after lunch, maybe before. I don't know, Harold. He lies so much it's hard to keep track. Caleb's head dropped against my chest. That was when every excuse I had made for that woman died. I carried him to the couch and called 911. Melissa stood up fast. That is completely unnecessary, she snapped. You're making him worse by rewarding the behavior. I did not answer her. I was counting Caleb's breaths. Too fast, then too shallow. His pulse fluttered under my fingers. The dispatcher asked what happened. My 9-year-old grandson was locked in a pantry for hours, I said, looking straight at Melissa. He's dehydrated, weak, and possibly injured. Melissa's face changed then. Not guilt. Calculation. Harold, she whispered, think about what you're saying. I am. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes because our town is small, and because I used to train half the men who showed up. The first through the door was a paramedic named Denise Walker, late 40s, sharp eyes, hair tucked tight under her cap. I knew her a little. Her father had been on B shift with me years back. She saw Caleb and went professional immediately. Blood pressure cuff, pulse ox, flashlight to the eyes, questions soft enough not to scare him. Then she looked toward the pantry, then at Melissa, then back at me. Her face went still. Not shocked, worse, recognizing. Harold, she said quietly, can you step into the kitchen with me? Nobody ever asks you to step into the kitchen when the news is good. I followed her. She kept her voice low. Were you out of town this weekend? Yes. Is she his legal guardian? His stepmother. Since my son passed, why? Denise glanced toward the living room where Melissa had begun crying now. Perfect little sobs. No tears yet, but she was working on it. Denise said, this is not the first time someone has called about that child. The kitchen seemed to tilt. What? 3 weeks ago, we responded to a call at the elementary school. Caleb fainted during gym. He told the nurse he hadn't eaten since the day before. Melissa arrived before transport and said he had a medical condition, low blood sugar, tied to anxiety. She refused ambulance transport and signed the form. I never heard about that. I figured you hadn't, Denise swallowed. There was another call last spring. Neighbor reported a child crying outside behind the shed after dark. When officers arrived, Melissa said Caleb had been playing and got himself locked out. She said you were asleep and hard of hearing. I was in Asheville at a fire safety conference. Denise's jaw tightened. Harold, I'm saying this carefully. That boy has been explaining things in ways children explain when they're afraid to accuse an adult. A sound came out of me I didn't recognize. She put a hand on my arm. Ride with us. I'll notify the hospital social worker before we arrive. As they loaded Caleb onto the stretcher, Melissa tried to climb into the ambulance. I'm his mother, she said. No, Caleb whispered. It was so soft most people might have missed it. Denise did not miss it. She looked at Melissa. Grandfather rides. You can follow in your car. Melissa's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, the shine was gone. At Blount Memorial Hospital, they put Caleb in a room with bright lights and warm blankets. I sat beside him holding one small foot through the blanket because his hands were busy with nurses and monitors. He kept trying to apologize. For the pantry, for the crackers, for making trouble, for telling Denise no. Every apology cut me in half. A young doctor named Patel came in around 9:40 p.m. He asked gentle questions. When had Caleb last eaten? How long had he been locked in? Did he have access to water? Had this happened before? Melissa arrived halfway through, wearing fresh lipstick, at the emergency room. While my grandson lay under a heated blanket because his body temperature had dropped, she stepped in and gave the room a performance. "Oh, Caleb," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "You've scared us so much." Caleb shrank. I saw it this time. I saw the way his shoulders folded. I saw the way his eyes searched for the nearest adult who might protect him. I saw what I had refused to see for months. "Doctor," Patel saw it too. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, "we're going to examine Caleb privately." Her smile froze. "I should be with him. For now, we need only medical staff and Mr. Bennett." "Why him?" The room went quiet. Dr. Patel's voice stayed calm. "Because Caleb asked for him." Melissa looked at Caleb. He looked at the blanket. She left the room, but not before giving me a look that said this was my fault. Maybe it was. Not in the way she meant. When the door shut, Caleb started crying without sound. Tears slid sideways into his hair. I leaned close. "Buddy, listen to me. Nobody is mad at you. Not one person in this room is mad at you," he whispered. "She said Dad would be ashamed." That sentence burned the last soft place in me. "Your daddy would have carried you out of that pantry with his bare hands," I said. "And then he would have stood beside me for everything that comes next." Caleb looked at me for a long time, like children do when they want to believe an adult, but adults have taught them caution. Then he said, "She has a book." "What book?" "The bad book." I kept my face still. "What's in it?" He rubbed his eyes with his fist. "Stuff I did wrong, like breathing loud, and wanting seconds, and crying about Dad. She says when the pages get full, I have to spend time in the quiet place." "The pantry?" He nodded. "How many times, Caleb?" He lifted one hand under the blanket and held up 4 fingers. Then he added, "Maybe 5. I don't remember if closet time counts." I had been in burning houses where the ceiling started to groan above me. I had been inside cars with gasoline spreading under my boots. I had heard mothers scream names into smoke, but I had never felt anything like the quiet that opened inside me then. That kind of rage does not yell, it organizes. Dr. Patel came back with a social worker named Marlene Price. She had gray hair, reading glasses on a chain, and the tired eyes of a woman who had spent 25 years hearing the worst things people do behind closed doors. I told her everything. The pantry, the teacher call, the outside step, the latch, the food, Denise's warning, Caleb's bad book. Marlene listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Mr. Bennett, do you have access to cameras at your house?" I almost said no. Then I remembered. Daniel had installed a security system the year before he died. Doorbell camera, driveway camera, back porch camera, hallway camera facing the side entrance. I had kept paying the subscription because canceling it felt like erasing one more thing my son had touched. "I do," I said. "Can you access the recordings?" My hands shook so badly I had to try the password twice. There are moments in life where you know the truth is waiting behind one click, and part of you wants to stay ignorant because once you see it, you cannot become the person who didn't see it. I opened the app. The hallway camera had footage from that morning. Melissa walking Caleb toward the pantry with one hand clamped around his upper arm. Caleb crying. Melissa bending down, saying something the camera did not catch. Then she opened the pantry door and pushed him inside. At 11:13 a.m., he slid a drawing under the door. At 2 p.m., she stepped over it. At 2:45 p.m., he tapped on the door. She walked past carrying a glass of iced tea. At 5:30 p.m., she sat at the table and started painting her nails. At 7:18 p.m., I entered the house. I watched myself hear the tapping. I watched myself open the door. I watched my grandson fall. Marlene placed one hand over her mouth, then lowered it because professionals don't get to fall apart when children still need them. "Send those to me," she said. "All of them." I did. Then I opened the camera history from the week before. And the week before that, the pantry door, the closet, the back porch, Caleb standing outside in cold weather, Melissa holding up the little notebook and tapping it with a pen, Caleb cleaning the kitchen floor while she sat at the table scrolling her phone, Caleb watching her eat while his own plate sat empty. Documentation, my old captain used to say, is what keeps the truth from dying when liars start talking. By midnight, the hospital had called Child Protective Services. A county investigator named Aaron Mills came in wearing jeans, boots, and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to be surprised. I gave him everything: camera clips, teacher call notes, Denise's information, hospital findings, and the location of the brass latch still screwed into my pantry door. Aaron watched 3 clips and said, "We're moving tonight." Melissa was in the waiting room when 2 deputies arrived. I wasn't there for the whole conversation, but I saw enough through the glass. She stood up smiling, probably thinking she could explain. She reached for the reasonable voice, the wounded widow voice, the overwhelmed mother voice. I watched each one fail. One deputy held up his hand when she tried to walk toward Caleb's room. Aaron handed her a paper. Emergency protective order. No contact with Caleb. Immediate removal from the home. Pending charges for child abuse, unlawful restraint, and neglect. Her mouth fell open. Then she looked through the glass and saw me. I did not look away. She pointed at me and said something I could not hear. I did not need to. I knew the shape of blame when I saw it. Caleb was admitted overnight. Dehydration, bruising, malnutrition concerns, stress response. Words no child should have attached to his name. At 3 a.m., after he finally slept, I went home with a deputy named Carson so they could photograph the pantry, the latch, the notebook, and anything else CPS needed. The house felt different when I walked in, not haunted. Accused. On the dining table, Melissa's nail polish still sat open, pale pink. The candle had burned low and drowned its own wick. In the kitchen trash, Carson found the drawing Caleb had slid under the pantry door. It was folded twice. I opened it carefully. He had drawn a fire truck. Red, with a ladder too tall for the paper. A stick figure in a yellow helmet stood beside it. Another stick figure was behind a rectangle, with lines like a door. Above them, in crooked pencil, Caleb had written, "Grandpa will come." I sat down hard. Deputy Carson turned away and pretended to study the wall because good men know when another man needs 5 seconds to break privately. The bad book was in Melissa's room, under a stack of folded sweaters. A little black notebook with gold corners. I put on gloves because Carson told me to. Every page had dates, offenses, punishments. Caleb asked for more milk. No dessert. Caleb cried after prayer. Pantry, 20 minutes. Caleb lied about being hungry. Closet, 1 hour. Caleb said he missed Daniel. No dinner. Caleb embarrassed me at church. Back porch until he apologizes. At the bottom of 1 page, she had written, "He needs to forget being Daniel's son and learn to be mine." That sentence told me everything. This was never about discipline. It was ownership, jealousy, control. Caleb's grief offended her because it proved Daniel still existed in someone else's heart. By sunrise, I had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just permanently. At 8 a.m., I called a lawyer named Samuel Greer. He had handled custody cases for 2 firefighters I knew, and had a reputation for being polite in the same way a locked gate is polite. "Sam," I said, "I need guardianship of my grandson." "How soon?" "Today." There was a pause. Paper rustled. "Bring everything. I have videos." "Then bring coffee too," he said. "This will move fast." Before I left the house, I called Caleb's school. I removed Melissa from the pickup list. I called the bank and froze the household card she used. I called the security company and changed every code. I called a locksmith and told him I needed new locks before noon. Then I stood in my hallway looking at the pantry door. The latch was still there, bright brass against white paint. I took a screwdriver from the drawer and removed it myself. I kept the screws in a plastic bag for evidence. At the courthouse, Sam Greer walked me through the filings: emergency guardianship, protective order extension, evidence index, medical report pending, CPS statement, security footage references, witnesses, teacher, paramedic, deputy, doctor. He looked up after reading Melissa's notebook. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "I've been doing this 30 years. This is one of the cleaner emergency cases I've seen." Clean. What a strange word for something so filthy. By 11:40 a.m., a judge granted me temporary emergency guardianship. By noon, CPS confirmed Caleb would be released, only to me. By 12:30, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I did not recognize. It was Melissa. "You are destroying Daniel's family." I looked at those words for a long time. Then I typed back, "Daniel's family is sleeping in a hospital bed because of you." Then I blocked the number and sent the message to Sam. "You don't argue with people like that. You document." That afternoon, Melissa made her mistake. She thought she still had an audience to save. Every Friday, she volunteered at a women's charity luncheon held in the fellowship hall of Grace Point Church. She loved those luncheons, loved the centerpieces, loved the photos. Loved being seen carrying foil-covered casseroles while people told her how strong she was. I knew she'd go there because people like Melissa run toward the room where their mask fits best. CPS knew where she was because I told them. The deputies arrived at Grace Point at 1:15 p.m., just as Melissa was standing near the dessert table, telling a cluster of women that Caleb was with doctors again, and she was trusting the Lord through this difficult season. That is what Mrs. Donnelly told me later. She happened to be there dropping off donated coats. She said the room went quiet when the deputies walked in. Not silent, all at once. Quiet in ripples. Melissa smiled at first. Then she saw Aaron Mills. Then she saw the deputy holding folded papers. Her face changed. Aaron did not raise his voice. That mattered to me when I heard it later. He did not make a show. He simply handed her the extended protective order and informed her she was being taken in for questioning related to child abuse, unlawful restraint, and neglect. Melissa looked around at the women from church, the women who had praised her patience and liked her photos and called her brave. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "Harold is grieving. He's confused. Caleb has behavioral problems." Mrs. Donnelly stepped forward then. "God bless teachers who have finally had enough." "No," she said. "He's hungry." That was the sentence people remembered. Not the charges, not the deputies, not Melissa crying. Mrs. Donnelly saying, "He's hungry," in a fellowship hall full of casseroles. The deputies walked Melissa out past the dessert table, past the bulletin board with her volunteer photo on it, past the women who suddenly had nothing to say. By 4 p.m., Caleb was discharged. He came out of the hospital in a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big because the nurse said kids like big sweatshirts after hard nights. He held my hand in the parking lot and watched every car like Melissa might appear from one of them. "She's not coming with us," I said. He nodded. "Not today, not tomorrow. Not unless a judge, CPS, and I all say it's safe. And buddy, I don't see that happening." He squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. When we got home, he stopped on the porch. The porch light was on. I had turned on every light in the house before leaving that morning. Kitchen, hallway, living room, Caleb's room, bathroom, even the little lamp Ruth used to keep in the window. I wanted that house to look awake. I wanted every shadow evicted. Caleb stepped inside slowly. He looked toward the pantry. The door was open. The latch was gone. I had taken the whole pantry door off its hinges and leaned it against the garage wall. He stared. I said, "Doors are for rooms, not for punishment." His chin trembled. Then he walked into the kitchen, picked up an apple from the bowl, and looked at me for permission. That nearly finished me. "You don't have to ask to eat in this house," I said. "Not ever." He took one bite and started crying with his mouth full. I pulled him close, and he cried into my coat, apple still in his hand, small body shaking with the kind of grief that had been waiting for safety. That night we had pancakes for dinner because rules can wait when a child has survived something. I made bacon too, and scrambled eggs, and toast, and cut strawberries because I wanted that table covered. I wanted abundance to be the first language he heard at home. He ate slowly at first, then faster, then stopped and looked ashamed. I pushed the plate gently back toward him. "You're allowed to be hungry," he whispered. "She said greedy boys turn into bad men." I sat down across from him. "Greedy is taking what belongs to somebody else. Hungry is your body asking to live. Don't you ever confuse the two again." He nodded. After dinner, we sat in the living room. He leaned against me under Ruth's old quilt while a nature show played on television. Bears, I think, maybe wolves. I wasn't watching. Grandpa? Yeah, buddy? Did Dad ever get locked in places? No. Would he be mad I cried? No. Would he be mad at her? I looked at the black television screen between scenes and saw my own face reflected there. Older than I felt yesterday. Harder maybe, but clearer. Yes, I said. He would. Caleb was quiet. Then he reached into the pocket of his sweatshirt and pulled out something folded small. Another drawing. A fire truck again. This time the door was open, and the small figure was standing beside the man in the helmet. He handed it to me. I made a better ending, he said. I had to close my eyes for a second. That's the only kind we're making from now on. Melissa was formally charged 2 days later. The court process took time, because courts always do. She tried everything. She said I was senile. She said Caleb was disturbed. She said grief had made the whole family unstable. She said the videos were taken out of context. She said locking a pantry was timeout. She said missing meals were natural consequences. But the thing about video is that it does not get tired of telling the truth. The hallway camera showed the truth. The hospital records showed the truth. The school nurse showed the truth. Denise showed the truth. Mrs. Donnelly showed the truth. The bad book showed the truth in Melissa's own handwriting. And Caleb, when he was ready, told the truth too. Not all at once. Nobody asked him to. A child is not a vending machine where you put in a question and get out trauma on schedule. He told it in pieces. To Marlene, to his therapist. Sometimes to me in the truck after school, when the road was quiet, and he did not have to look at my face. He told me she used to say nobody wanted a sad little boy. He told me she called his father a ghost taking up space. He told me she threw away birthday cards from Daniel's old firehouse friends because dead people don't send mail. That one, I fixed. I called every firefighter I knew. Within 3 weeks, Caleb got 47 cards. Some had photos of Daniel, some had stories. One had a picture of Daniel asleep in a recliner at Station 4 with a half-eaten sandwich on his chest. Caleb laughed at that one until he hiccuped. Healing is not one big miracle. It is 1,000 small corrections. A full lunchbox, an unlocked door, a porch light, a teacher who believes, a grandfather who finally pays attention. 6 months later, the judge granted me permanent guardianship. Melissa took a plea after her lawyer saw the full evidence packet. She served time, lost all contact rights, and her name became the kind people lower their voices around in grocery aisles. I did not celebrate that. Celebration is for birthdays and ball games. What I felt was relief. A door closed. A lock turned from the right side. Caleb is 11 now. He still asks before taking the last biscuit sometimes. He still wakes up if a cabinet shuts too hard. He still keeps snacks in his backpack, though now he says they're emergency rations, and we let him because safety sometimes looks strange before it looks normal. But he is louder now. He laughs from his belly. He plays Little League badly, but enthusiastically. He built a weather station in the backyard out of PVC pipe, a plastic cup, and more duct tape than any scientific instrument should require. Every Saturday, we make pancakes, and every Saturday he asks if chocolate chips are allowed. Every Saturday I say, in this house, they're practically required. The pantry still has no door. People notice when they visit. I tell them the truth if they ask. That door forgot what it was for, I say. So I retired it. Last month, Caleb brought home an essay from school. The prompt was, write about someone who makes you feel safe. He wrote about me. I read it in the truck outside the school because he handed it to me and said, don't be weird about it in front of people. So I waited until he ran back inside for baseball practice, and then I read every word. He wrote that I came home early. He wrote that I opened the door. He wrote that I believed him. He wrote, my grandpa used to be a firefighter, but now he just saves me in regular ways. Brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents, anyone listening who has a child in your life, to hear an old man clearly. The warning signs are not always screams. Sometimes they are extra crackers hidden in a backpack. Sometimes they are a child asking if phones work at the lake. Sometimes they are shoulders relaxing when one adult leaves the room. Do not be so polite that you ignore fear. Do not be so tired that you accept every explanation. Do not be so desperate for peace that you leave a child alone with someone who only behaves when watched. I spent 32 years running into burning buildings. The most dangerous fire I ever missed was burning quietly in my own hallway, but I came home early. I opened the door. And my grandson lived long enough to make a better ending. Sometimes love means noticing the small signs before they become screams: a quiet child, an untouched plate, a door that should never be locked. When we slow down, listen closely, and choose courage over comfort, we can become someone's safe place again. Even after hard days, one open door can help a heart believe in home